The calm before the storm. The vast expanse of space lay still, a never-ending black canvas dotted with stars. The war that had raged across the galaxy for centuries seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The planets that once thrived with life had now become war zones, reduced to nothing more than battlefields where entire civilizations fought for survival. Alien fleets roamed the stars, ruthless and unchallenged, laying waste to anything that stood in their path. Among the countless alien empires, the Draxians were the most feared. Their ships, massive and menacing, could obliterate entire fleets with a single strike. They had crushed every force that dared oppose them. They were relentless in their pursuit of power and dominance. The Draxian Command Center, a floating fortress that orbited a dying star, buzzed with activity as their generals prepared for yet another offensive. Their war was nearing its final stage. This would be the end of all resistance. The Draxian High Command gathered around a large holotable. Maps of the galaxy stretched out before them, showing their planned route for the upcoming assault. They had already wiped out several powerful civilizations, and now they were preparing to finish off the last resistance. The alien species that remained in the war zone would soon be crushed under their boots. "This is it," said General Carr, the leader of the Draxian forces. His voice was calm, almost too calm for someone about to lead an empire into its final conquest. "Our victory is assured. The humans are nothing. They are weak. Their fleets are small and disorganized." The room fell silent as the generals exchanged glances. They had heard whispers of the human fleet, of course, but they dismissed them as nothing more than myths and rumors. How could humans, a species so young and fragile, challenge the might of the Draxian Empire? The idea was laughable. "Our scouts have reported strange energy readings near the human colonies," said another officer, a young strategist named Lieutenant Farrell. "But I believe it's nothing more than an anomaly." Kerr's gaze darkened. "Do not waste our time with such nonsense. Focus on what is real. The humans will be of no concern once we reach their systems. We have seen their ships. They are nothing. Weak. Their technology is primitive, and their weapons are outdated." The others nodded in agreement, confident in the superiority of their forces. The Draxian fleet was the most powerful in the galaxy, and nothing could stand against it. Their victory was all but guaranteed. In the distance, far from the reach of the Draxian forces, Earth's fleet waited in the quiet of space. The human forces had been preparing for this moment for years, though few in the galaxy knew of their existence. Earth, long considered a small, insignificant planet on the outer edges of the galaxy, had been building a fleet in secret, and now the time for action had arrived. Inside the command center of Earth's flagship, the resolute Commander Alexis Hayes stood at the helm, staring out at the stars. Her eyes were sharp, and her mind was focused. She knew what was coming. The Draxians had no idea what they were about to face. "Prepare the fleet," Commander Hayes ordered. The human fleet began to move, their ships gliding silently through space. Each ship was a testament to humanity's determination, power, and resilience. As they neared the war zone, the enormity of the task ahead became clearer, but humanity had never been one to back down from a challenge. Back on the Draxian command ship, General Carr and his officers continued to make their final preparations, but the unease that had started to creep into the hearts of the generals remained unspoken. They were confident, yes, but there was an underlying fear they couldn't shake. They had made a fatal mistake, underestimating the one force they should have feared. And soon, they would find out just how wrong they were. The calm before the storm was over. The battle was about to begin. The time had come. The stillness of space was shattered by the thunderous engines of humanity's warships. The resolute Earth's flagship led the charge, its sleek hull cutting through the darkness. Behind it followed dozens of ships, each one a testament to humanity's ingenuity and determination. For years, these ships had been built in secrecy, hidden away from the eyes of the galaxy, and now they were about to make their mark. Commander Hayes stood at the helm of the Resolute, her eyes fixed on the distant star system, where the Warzone would soon erupt. She could feel the tension in the air, but there was no room for doubt. They had trained for this moment. Every soldier, every pilot, every crew member was ready. The Draxians might have underestimated them, but that mistake would cost them dearly. "Captain, status report," Hayes ordered, her voice calm yet sharp, betraying none of the nerves that might have shaken others. She had led countless missions, but this was different. This wasn't just about one battle. It was about showing the galaxy what humanity was capable of. "Fleet ready for engagement, Commander. All ships in position," the captain responded. "We're clear to enter the Warzone." Hayes nodded, a determined look crossing her face. "Let's make it count. Engage the warp drives." The fleet surged forward, faster than any alien fleet had ever dared to move. They were about to enter the heart of the Warzone, where the Draxian forces had made their final stand. Hayes had no intention of allowing them to continue their conquest of the galaxy. It was time for the galaxy to learn the truth. Humanity was not weak, and if the Draxians thought they could simply walk over Earth, they were about to be proven horribly wrong. Meanwhile, on the Draxian flagship, General Kerr was overseeing the final preparations for their attack on the last remaining resistance in the Warzone. His confidence had grown in the past few weeks. He was sure that the final push would be easy. His fleet had wiped out countless civilizations, and Earth was no different in his mind. Kerr stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, observing the movement of his ships as they neared their target. "The humans are nothing," he muttered to himself. "They have no idea what's coming." His officers, who had been listening to his words, exchanged glances, but no one dared to speak up. It was too late to question the strategy now. They were committed. As the Draxians prepared for their strike, an eerie calm settled over their warships. The fleet moved like a storm ready to break, a massive, unstoppable force that seemed to swallow everything in its path. Their weapons were primed, and their soldiers were eager to fight. But that calm was shattered when the first signs of humanity's arrival rippled through the star system. A small blip appeared on the Draxian radar screens, something they hadn't expected. A single ship, Earth's flagship, had entered the Warzone. "General Kerr," one of his officers said, sounding a bit uneasy, "there is an anomaly detected. A human warship has entered the system. It's bigger than we anticipated." Kerr frowned. "It's just one ship. We've faced worse." The officer hesitated. "It's not just one ship, General. It's the flagship of Earth's fleet. And it's not alone. We're detecting more human ships approaching fast." For the first time, a sense of unease crept into Kerr's mind. But he quickly dismissed it. They had faced countless enemies before, and none had been able to stand against the Draxian might. What were a few human ships in the grand scheme of things? As the Draxian fleet continued to advance, the human ships made their move. They moved with precision, no hesitation, as if they had been trained for this moment their entire lives. The Draxian fleet had underestimated them, assuming that their primitive weapons and outdated tactics would never hold up against the might of the Draxians. But humanity had a secret, a deadly secret, and it was about to be revealed in the most explosive way possible. Commander Hayes stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes locked on the massive fleet of Draxian warships in the distance. Her fingers hovered over the controls as she gave the order to open fire. "Let them see the power of humanity," she said softly, her voice steady and commanding. "Prepare to engage." The moment the command was given, the human fleet exploded into action. They were not as numerous as the Draxian fleet, but they were fast, organized, and ruthless. The first salvo of energy blasts hit the Draxian warships with an intensity that took them completely by surprise. The energy beams cut through the Draxian ships' shields like paper, and explosions erupted across their ranks. Kerr's eyes widened in disbelief as he watched the destruction unfold on his command screen. "Impossible," he muttered. "Their weapons, they shouldn't have this kind of power." As more energy blasts ripped through the Draxian fleet, Kerr finally understood. Humanity had been hiding its true strength. What they had dismissed as primitive was actually far beyond anything the Draxians had ever encountered. Earth's fleet was not just another collection of ships. It was a force capable of wiping out entire armies in moments. In mere minutes, the human fleet had changed the course of the war. The battle had only just begun, but the tides had already started to turn. The Draxian fleet, once so sure of its overwhelming strength, was now scrambling to regroup. The blast from the human ships had torn through their outer defenses, leaving them vulnerable in a way they hadn't expected. On board the Resolute, Commander Hayes watched the chaos unfold on the holographic screens before her. The once pristine image of the enemy fleet was now filled with red blips, damage indicators flashing across her display. Every hit the human ships delivered was another step closer to victory. "Target their weak points," Hayes ordered, her voice steady as she stared at the screen. "Focus on their shields. We can break them down, but we need precision." Her crew worked seamlessly, their movements synchronized as if they were all one mind. They were prepared for this. Every human on that ship knew the risks and the stakes. They were no longer fighting to protect their planet. Now, they were fighting for the survival of the galaxy itself. "Captain, we've got multiple breaches in the Draxian fleet's perimeter," the weapons officer reported. "Their shields are failing faster than expected." Hayes smiled. "Good. Keep the pressure on. If they try to regroup, we'll catch them off guard." Meanwhile, on the Draxian flagship, General Kerr was fighting to maintain control of his forces. His hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The sudden onslaught of human firepower had shattered his calm composure, and now, the very ground beneath him seemed to shake with each explosion that rocked his ship. "This is impossible," Kerr shouted, his voice rising in panic. "We've never faced anything like this. They shouldn't have this kind of power." His officers were equally shocked. "General, they're using advanced energy weapons. We don't know how they've developed this kind of technology. It's beyond anything we've encountered." Kerr growled. "What are they? Some kind of ghost fleet? How did they get so strong? Find out how." But it was already too late. The Draxian forces were scattered, their once formidable ships now crippled and retreating. Some tried to return fire, but their weapons were slow and ineffective against the speed and agility of the human warships. The Resolute darted in and out of the battlefield, taking out one Draxian vessel after another. The speed and coordination of humanity's fleet was unlike anything the Draxians had expected. It was as if the humans had been preparing for this moment for centuries. Their tactics were a combination of innovation and deadly precision that the Draxians simply couldn't match. "General, the enemy is advancing fast," one of Kerr's officers reported. "We can't keep up. Their ships are too quick, too powerful." Kerr gritted his teeth. He had underestimated the humans, and now it was too late to change his mind. He ordered his fleet to retreat, but the humans were already one step ahead. "Don't let them escape," Hayes barked. "We end this now." With a signal, the human ships closed in, surrounding the remaining Draxian vessels like wolves closing in on their prey. The Resolute was a towering presence in the center of the battlefield, its weapons continuing to fire relentlessly at the retreating enemy. No ship, no matter how powerful, could escape the human wrath. The Draxian fleet was broken. Its once proud ships were scattered across space, destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The survivors were few, and they knew their fate was sealed. The humans had come, and they had shown no mercy. Kerr stood in stunned silence, watching his fleet unravel before his eyes. His heart pounded in his chest, and for the first time in his life, he felt fear creeping into his thoughts. How had this happened? How had a species they considered weak, primitive even, managed to defeat them so thoroughly? This cannot be happening," Kerr muttered under his breath. He refused to believe it. It was impossible. As the final remnants of the Draxian fleet fled or were destroyed, Commander Hayes stood tall on the bridge of the Resolute. She looked out at the shattered remains of the battlefield, knowing that this victory was just the beginning. "We've done it," the captain said, his voice filled with awe. Hayes nodded, but she didn't feel the rush of celebration that came with most victories. Instead, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about sending a message to the galaxy, a message that humanity had arrived, and they would no longer be ignored. "There's more to do," Hayes said, her eyes focused on the horizon. "But this battle is over. The galaxy won't forget this day." As the remnants of the Draxian fleet drifted helplessly in the void of space, General Carr, now alone on the command deck of his flagship, clenched his fists in a desperate attempt to maintain some sense of control. His once proud fleet, which had struck terror into the hearts of countless worlds, was reduced to nothing more than a scattered, disorganized mess. "Sir, the last of the remaining ships are retreating into the far reaches of the system. They won't last much longer," reported his communications officer, who stood rigid at his post, his voice trembling. Carr, however, did not respond immediately. His mind raced. The humans had struck with a fury and strategy that caught the Draxians completely off guard. But more than that, there was something about their ships, their weaponry, that sent chills down his spine. The humans had fought with the power of a species that had been at war for millennia. "How did they do this?" Carr muttered, more to himself than to his officers. His once unshakable confidence had turned into confusion and fear. The Draxian Empire had never faced a threat like this. Even the greatest of their military strategists had failed to predict the humans' tactics. "They had to have been planning this for years," Carr finally said, his voice cold, almost dead. "Send out a distress call. Get the reinforcements we were promised. We cannot lose this battle." But as the communications officer tried to reach out for help, the connection remained dead silent. The distress signal sent from the flagship disappeared into the void, swallowed by the stars. There would be no reinforcements. Back aboard the Resolute, Commander Hayes monitored every detail of the situation. Her mind raced, not with triumph, but with the recognition that this wasn't over. The Draxians were finished, yes, but their defeat had sent ripples across the galaxy. There were others out there, waiting and watching, some perhaps eager to avenge their fallen comrades. Hayes knew that the peace they had hoped for might never come. In its place, a new chapter of conflict and war might arise, one in which humanity would be forced to fight not just for survival, but for dominance. "Commander, we've lost contact with the last of the enemy forces," the comms officer reported, breaking Hayes from her thoughts. "All ships have either been destroyed or retreated beyond range." "Good," she replied simply, but the unease never left her face. "Prepare for any possible counterattack. We don't know who's watching, and we don't know who's next." As the fleet regrouped, the victorious human ships turned their attention to the remnants of the Draxian Empire, now a dismal sight. The flagship that had once commanded an army of millions lay limping, an empty husk in space. No matter how much Carr tried to salvage it, the ship's engines were fried, and the crew was on the brink of mutiny. His reign was over. On the flagship, Carr now faced a final decision. He couldn't run, and there was no one left to fight. In a bitter silence, he stood at the command center of his once mighty ship, contemplating his next move. His hands shook as he considered the reality. The war was over, and his forces were destroyed. He had never expected this outcome, never dreamed that the humans he had dismissed so easily would bring his entire fleet to its knees. What was once a proud force in the galaxy now felt like a dying ember, flickering out in the vast emptiness of space. In the depths of space, the remnants of the Draxian fleet began to scatter, leaving the human ships to patrol the Warzone. The message had been clear. Earth was no longer a vulnerable target. It was a force to be reckoned with. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. The galaxy was on edge. No one expected the humans to act so decisively. No one had expected them to be ready, let alone able to challenge such an established power as the Draxians. Humanity had proven itself to be far stronger than anyone had thought. It was a message heard across every star system. As humanity's fleet stood victorious in the Warzone, Hayes turned to her officers, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of the responsibility ahead. "We've won," she said, looking out across the vastness of space. "But the fight is far from over. This galaxy is changing, and we will lead the way. There are those who will want to test us, and we must be ready." She paused for a moment, her eyes steady. "Our victory here today is just the beginning." The last of the Draxian ships fell silent, drifting in the void, their once formidable weapons and shields useless against the might of humanity's fleet. Commander Hayes stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the fading remains of their enemy. It had been a brutal battle, one that had left no room for mercy. The Draxians had underestimated humanity's strength, and now they were paying the ultimate price. But for Hayes, the victory felt hollow. There were no celebrations on the bridge. The crew members went about their duties with somber expressions, their minds heavy with the knowledge that the galaxy was still on the brink of more wars. While the Draxians were no longer a threat, other factions, other species, were already whispering in the shadows. "Commander," Lieutenant Reynolds spoke up, breaking Hayes from her thoughts. "We've received a transmission from Earth. They want us to return." Hayes nodded, but she didn't immediately respond. The call to return to Earth was expected, but it felt too soon. The Warzone was still fresh with the aftermath of battle, and the weight of her responsibilities felt more pressing now than ever before. She knew the real work was about to begin, maintaining peace in a galaxy where humanity had just shown its true strength. "We can't go home yet," Hayes said quietly, looking out into the vastness of space, where the wreckage of the Draxian fleet drifted like a ghostly reminder of their defeat. "There's still so much more to do." A quiet murmur of agreement passed through the bridge. Hayes wasn't the only one who felt that a war had been won, but a peace had not yet been secured. The galaxy would never be the same. Earth's victory had been decisive, but the ripple effects were just beginning to spread. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, various factions began to take notice of humanity's sudden rise to power. The Galactic Senate, a body that had once dismissed Earth as a primitive world, now found itself faced with a new and uncomfortable reality. They had ignored the warnings about humanity's potential, and now they had to reckon with it. "There is no denying it now," Admiral Threx of the Uvalian Dominion said, his sharp voice cutting through the council chambers. "The humans have proven themselves. If we are to keep our power, we must move quickly. They won't wait for us to catch up." Across the room, High Minister Relia of the Voran Collective shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her people had long been one of the galaxy's most advanced races, and they had never expected a world like Earth to pose a serious threat. But now, they could no longer ignore the growing power of humanity. "We must prepare," Relia said cautiously. "Not just for the possibility of human expansion, but for the consequences of this victory. If they challenge us, we must be ready. The humans don't fight with the same rules we do. They are unpredictable, dangerous." On the opposite side of the table, Threx slammed his fist on the surface. "Dangerous. They've proven they can wipe out entire fleets in a matter of hours. What do you call that?" The chamber fell into a tense silence. The leaders of the galaxy's factions now had to contend with the fact that Earth was no longer just a small, inconsequential world. It was a force, and they would have to decide whether to treat humanity as an ally or as a threat. Back aboard the Resolute, Commander Hayes received the message from the Galactic Senate. It was a request for a summit, a meeting of the galactic powers where Earth would be invited to speak. The tone was diplomatic, but the message was clear. Earth's newfound strength had forced the galaxy to take notice. "Prepare for the summit," Hayes ordered, her voice calm but firm. "We'll meet with them, but make no mistake, we are not here to beg for peace. We are here to show them what Earth has become." As Hayes watched her crew prepare for the unknown challenges ahead, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of pride and unease. They had won the battle, But the war for Earth's place in the galaxy was just beginning. It was a fight for respect, for recognition, and for survival. As the Resolute prepared to leave the war zone, the crew could sense a change in the air. The sense of triumph that had filled the ship after the battle was slowly replaced by a quiet tension. Word had spread across the galaxy about humanity's decisive victory. Ships from various factions had already begun to appear in the vicinity, keeping a careful distance, watching Earth's fleet with suspicion. Commander Hayes stood at the command center, her eyes fixed on the view screen. The vastness of space lay before them, empty and silent, but the sense of danger was palpable. The enemies had been wiped out in a matter of hours, but the real challenge now lay in the political arena. The galaxy's balance of power was about to shift, and humanity would be at the center of it. "Commander, we've received several requests for communication," Lieutenant Reynolds reported, breaking Hayes' deep thoughts. Hayes didn't respond immediately. She could feel the weight of every decision now. Her hand hovered over the control panel, and she paused. Every choice could have far-reaching consequences. The galaxy was watching Earth closely, and humanity's next move would either solidify their place in the stars or ignite a chain reaction that could lead to further conflict. "We'll respond to the Senate's invitation first," Hayes said finally, her voice calm but steady. "Prepare the ship. We're going to meet the galaxy's leaders face to face." As the ship set course for the Galactic Senate, the crew fell into a quiet routine, the weight of their upcoming mission hanging over them. The fleet was strong, but they were not the only power in the galaxy anymore. If humanity wanted to protect what they had earned, they would have to prove their worth. Meanwhile, the Senate was in disarray. The leaders of various factions had gathered for an emergency meeting, and tensions were running high. What was once a diplomatic council was now a battleground of conflicting interests. The rise of humanity had shaken the foundation of the galaxy's power structure, and no one was sure what to make of Earth's sudden appearance as a dominant force. "How do we deal with them?" High Minister Relia asked, her voice tense. "The humans have proven themselves more powerful than any of us could have imagined. They don't play by our rules." Admiral Threx of the Uvalian Dominion stood at the head of the table, his face hardened with resolve. "We've underestimated them before. Now it's time to make sure we don't make the same mistake again. We either form an alliance or prepare for war." The room went silent at the mention of war. The galaxy had seen enough bloodshed, and no one wanted to risk another devastating conflict. But the truth was undeniable. Humanity had changed the game. The question now was how the other factions would respond. "We can't afford to take them lightly," Threx continued. "If we're not careful, Earth could upset the balance of power in a way none of us are prepared for." Across the room, Minister Naller of the Vectar Dominion spoke up. "The humans are unpredictable. We've never encountered a species like them before. They're willing to do whatever it takes to protect their own. If they wanted to, they could wipe out entire sectors with ease. We must act quickly to find out what their true intentions are." As the debates raged on, a single message was sent to the Resolute. Earth's fleet was being summoned to the Galactic Senate for the first time. The invitation was clear. Earth was now a player in galactic politics, and all factions would have to decide where they stood. Back aboard the Resolute, Commander Hayes stood before her crew, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had prepared for many things, but never for this. She had expected to fight, to defend Earth from any threat that might emerge. But now, she was about to step into the heart of a galaxy that had already decided humanity was no longer just a footnote in its history. "We've earned this meeting," Hayes said to her officers, her voice firm, but resolute. "But don't let the title fool you. This will not be a simple negotiation. We're going to show them who we are." The crew nodded, knowing that their presence in the Senate would speak volumes. They were no longer just soldiers of Earth. They were representatives of a new power, one that could no longer be ignored. As the Resolute approached the Senate's space station, the tension on board was palpable. The crew couldn't help but wonder what awaited them in the council chambers. Would they face hostility, or would they find a diplomatic path forward? Either way, they knew that humanity's future was at stake. The fleet arrived, and the massive station loomed ahead, its sleek, metallic surface glinting in the light of distant stars. The Resolute came to a halt, its engines powering down as it docked with the station. A fleet of ships from various factions surrounded them, each one bristling with the unspoken challenge of the moment. Hayes took a deep breath, her hand resting on the console. "Prepare for the summit," she said softly. "Let's show them who we are." The Resolute was now docked within the heart of the Galactic Senate space station. A strange silence hung in the air as Commander Hayes and her crew prepared for the meeting. Outside the ship's massive windows, hundreds of other vessels from various factions hovered, each holding their position with an air of cautious observation. Humanity's arrival was not a quiet affair. The entire galaxy was watching, waiting to see how Earth would handle its newfound power. Inside the station, Hayes and her team made their way to the chamber where the Senate awaited. The walls were adorned with symbols from dozens of species, representing the galaxy's various factions. It was a striking reminder of the diversity of life in the universe. And yet, here they were, humanity's fleet standing at the threshold of galactic diplomacy. "Commander Hayes, welcome," a voice rang out. It belonged to High Minister Relia, the head of the Galactic Senate, who stood alongside a group of military and diplomatic leaders from different sectors. Her tone was polite, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. This was not a casual meeting. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Hayes nodded, her posture firm but respectful. "Thank you for your invitation. Humanity's fleet is here to show that we seek peace, but we also stand ready to protect our own." Relia gave a small smile, though it did not reach her eyes. "We're well aware of humanity's power, Commander. The events of the past few days have made that clear, but peace is not something easily attained when such strength exists." The words hit Hayes harder than she expected. It wasn't a surprise, but hearing it spoken aloud made the situation more real. This was a pivotal moment, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. Humanity's strength could either build alliances or tear them apart. As they took their seats at the long, oval table, a large holographic map of the galaxy flickered to life in the center. It displayed key locations, military installations, and trade routes. A few of the faction's representatives eyed Earth's position on the map with apprehension, unsure of how this new power would affect their interests. Admiral Threx, leader of the Uvalian Dominion, spoke first. His species was known for their militaristic nature and their advanced technology. "Commander Hayes, Earth's fleet has proven itself formidable. But strength alone cannot guarantee survival. You're facing challenges you've never experienced. The balance of power in the galaxy is delicate. There are consequences for disrupting it." Hayes met his gaze calmly. "We didn't come here to disrupt anything. We came to protect our world, and we expect to be treated as equals. Humanity doesn't seek to conquer. We simply want to ensure our place in the galaxy, alongside everyone else." The room fell silent as Threx considered her words. He was not the only one skeptical. Many of the other representatives exchanged wary glances, clearly unsure how to proceed. Minister Neller, the representative from the Vectar Dominion, was next to speak. Her species was known for their cunning diplomacy, often maneuvering behind the scenes to further their own agendas. "Equal treatment. What does that mean for the rest of us, Commander? Are you saying that Earth will hold a place at this table, not just as a member, but as a power? Because if that's the case, we must prepare for what comes next." Her question hung heavily in the air. The words had the effect of stirring the room. Would Earth stand beside the galaxy's established powers, or would it seek to dominate and push them aside? Humanity had already shown its strength. Could they be trusted with power? "Peace requires compromise, but it also requires strength," Hayes said. "We will not back down from protecting our people and our interests, but we do not seek to force anyone into submission." The tension grew thick, but Hayes could feel the change in the atmosphere. Something was happening. The room of galaxy leaders, once so sure of themselves, was starting to shift. The balance was uncertain, and humanity was at the center of it all. "I propose an alliance," Admiral Threx said, his voice carrying an unusual weight. "A pact between humanity and the Uvalian Dominion, the Vectar Dominion, and the Galactic Senate. We cannot ignore what Earth has done. You have the power to defend yourselves, but perhaps we can learn to share it. We would rather have you as an ally than an enemy." For the first time, the leaders from the other factions nodded in agreement. There were murmurs of approval, and though the distrust remained, it was clear that humanity was now an undeniable force in galactic politics. Commander Hayes looked around the room. She knew that this was not a complete victory. There would be challenges ahead, but this was a step. Humanity had earned its place at the table, not through subjugation, but through strength, resilience, and the willingness to stand firm for what they believed in. "We accept your proposal," Hayes said, standing tall. "But know this, Earth is not a passive player in this galaxy. We will never stand by while others decide our fate. We stand for our people, and we will stand for the peace we are forging here today." With those words, the atmosphere in the room shifted once again. A new order was beginning to form. The balance of power had been irrevocably altered, and humanity, once seen as weak, had proved it was a force to be reckoned with. The meeting adjourned, and Hayes and her crew returned to the Resolute, their place in the galaxy now more certain than ever. As they left the Galactic Senate station behind, they knew their journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new enemies, and new alliances to navigate. But one thing was certain: humanity had arrived, and it was here to stay.